Hello, all. Today in Random in Psychology, we are going to be talking about problem solving and problem solving strategies. Before we talk about problem solving strategies, we should talk about the idea of what exactly is a problem. So, a problem could be a discrepancy between our present state and our goal state. And this could be anything between, like I'm tired, but I have to do my chores, or it could be, lots of different things. And basically, when we have something that we perceive as a problem, there's really no readily apparent or easy solution for it. We really kind of have to think on it before we can make a decision about it. So, problem solving, which is our topic for today, is a systematic plan for generating possible solutions that can be tested to see if they're correct. So, two of the typical problem solving solutions that we use include using algorithms and using heuristics. So, algorithms pretty much guarantee that we will come up with the solution to a problem, although they can be more time consuming when we're using them. So, basically, we're going to explore and evaluate every possible solution in a very systematic way until the correct solution is becomes available to us. So think about, when I do a word search, one of the things that I do is I will look at the words that I'm supposed to be finding and look for letters that are kind of, you don't see them very often. So a Q or a P or something like that. And then I will literally go line by line and look for that letter. And when I find one, I stop and look and see if there's letters around it that would fit with the word that I need. If there isn't, then I keep going and do that very systematically. So that would be an example of using like an algorithm for our searching for the correct answer. If you are looking for something at a grocery store and you went up and down every single aisle to try to find that thing, that would be using an algorithmic response to problem solving. So the other option is to use a heuristic type problem solving strategy. And this is where we come up with some informal rules of thumb and we test those out. So we generate ideas and test those out based upon those rules of thumb that we've come up with. But those can't guarantee success as using the algorithm can. So it's kind of similar to thinking about categories and applying strategies that have worked with those categories previously. So, for example, if I'm in the grocery store and I'm looking for Pop Tarts for my son and I don't know where the Pop Tarts are, I may think to myself, okay, so previously I've found them in the bakery section where there's other bread, and previously I found them in the breakfast section where the cereals are. So I'm going to check those two spots first. And then if I don't come up with them there, then I'll, think of some other options. Okay. So that would be using a heuristic strategy in order to figure out where exactly should I search rather than using the algorithmic strategy, which would literally be to go up and down every single aisle looking for Pop Tarts. Or we could just ask somebody, right? So what are some of the barriers to effective problem solving? What stops us from being effective problem solvers? One is what we call a mental set. This is basically a set of preconceived ideas that we have that affect our perceptions and they influence how we perceive and approach a problem. So, if we are very focused on a particular strategy and we don't, we're not open to other ideas, then this would be an example of a mental set. So, think of our mental is set in a particular manner. Think of it that way. Another barrier to effective problem solving would be what we call functional fixedness. This is basically the idea to fail to see a new or different use for a common or familiar object. So basically, if, I'm trying to fix something, but I don't have the right tool, then my brain's like, well, I can't fix it because I don't have the right tool. What if instead I looked at the tools that I had and I kind of took them mentally apart in my head into their fundamental pieces to figure out how I could use them to reach the goal that I was trying to reach? So, using what we call the generic parts technique, basically, we're going to break items up into their parts and see what uses we can find of each part in order to figure out the problem that we're having. Another thing that's interesting about this functional fixedness idea is that um, mental fatigue can actually decrease functional fixedness. So, if we're tired, we may actually recognize new uses of something um, better than if we're not tired. We also know that um, people who break something apart and use it for something different, we perceive people that do that as more creative. So, for example, creating a clock out of a frisbee. Um, we may look at that and think like, wow, that's really creative. That's really cool. So it's not something that we would naturally think of because we are fixed on seeing a frisbee as a frisbee. It's a toy or it's a thing that we use for playing frisbee or ultimate frisbee, and it's not something that we would turn into a clock. Okay. Other barriers to accurate or effective problem solving include what we call the availability heuristic. This is assuming that things that we can bring to mind happen often. Um, and they happen more often than things that we can't bring to mind. So, for example, if we remember seeing a plane crash on TV, we might think because of the availability heuristic, because that information is available to us, that planes crash more often than, say, cars do. But we know that car crashes occur way more often than plane crashes do. Now, here's the thing, if we actually talked about on the news the number of car crashes that happened in our city in one day, the whole news broadcast would just be car crash, car crash, car crash, right? So we don't hear about them as much, and so we think that they happen less often than the things that we do hear about. So that's the availability heuristic. If something is available to our brain because we've heard about it recently, or because it's really memorable, then we'll think it happens more often than it actually does. Sorry about that. Another one is what we call the representativeness heuristic. That's an assumption that a belief about an individual who seems to represent a group is representative of that whole group. So, especially if we don't know many people from that group. So, remember, we've talked before about in groups, my groups that I belong to, and out groups, the groups that I don't belong to. We know that we don't typically often interact with people in the out groups. And so, we may meet a person, one, from that out group and think, oh, this person is athletic. So, all people that are like them must be athletic. And yes, the representative heuristic can be the basis of developing stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination. Another barrier to problem solving effectively is what we call confirmation bias. Rather than walking around and looking for information that proves us wrong, we walk around and look for information that proves us right. And so the media that we choose, typically we're not looking for articles that go against our personal opinions or what we believe. We're looking at articles and we'll read more articles that agree with what we already believe rather than searching out new sources to learn new information from. So we are biased towards information that confirms what we already believe. So today in Random in Psychology, we talked about problem solving strategies, and barriers to problem solving. I'll see you tomorrow.